Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says Government unveils package to boost exports, revive housing sector. What is the context? Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has unveiled third set of reforms for the Indian economy. This is to arrest the slowdown that India is witnessing currently. Previously, the government has also taken two waves of economic reforms. What are those? As a first wave of reform, the government encouraged the private sector investment by introducing liberalization in the FDI as well as the FPI sector. As a second wave of reform, in order to bring stability in the banking sector, to address the non-performing assets as well as revive the banking sector, the government also introduced banking mergers of about 10 banks into 4 units. In order to understand what these mergers are, what are its advantages, which were the banks that were merged, what are its disadvantages, is it going to be the panacea for the economic slowdown, please visit our CNA on 31st of August 2019. Now, as a matter of third wave of economic reforms, the government has introduced or initiated some of the key changes when it comes to the export sector as well as the housing sector. What was the need that the government had to come up with reforms in these two sectors? The reason being, high growth is a necessity for any country, which means increase in the GDP numbers as well as the growth rate. One important sector which adds value to the growth rate is the export sector. And what we currently see is that this export sector is directly proportional to the growth rate as well. Therefore, increasing this export sector is one which leads to the increase in the growth rate as well. Looking at statistics, India's merchandise exports in the month of August declined for the second time in this financial year, which already had lost enough in the month of April. So in the month of April, there was already a depreciation or a cut down with respect to the exports, and this has further increased during the month of August, and it has contracted by about 6.05%. It is because of this contraction or reduction in the exports, that is why the government had to give a fillip to the export sector. That is why the government has taken this key initiative. Apart from this, what we also need to realize is there are multiple ministries in the government of India. Let's take for example the Ministry of External Affairs. Let's take the example of the Ministry of Commerce, and then you also have the Ministry of Finance. So all these three ministries are involved in the export of a particular good from India to another country. What it also means is there are multiple departments within these ministries, but these ministries does not have interministerial interdepartment coordination, which means the implementation when it comes to the external sector, exporting sector is not in close coordination, adding to the ooze where the lack of data as well as coherence between these ministries as well as departments. The third challenge is with respect to the GST sector. Let's take the example of MSME. What happens? There are people who are working in this particular small industries. They do infuse certain amount of money into this sector. But over a period of time, what the government will also have to do is they'll have to provide tax rebate. And that tax rebate is in the form of input tax credit. So what this means is the MSME sector and the people in that sector have made an investment. They have introduced certain commodities into the market. In the future, the government will have to partially refund this particular amount in the form of input tax credit. But the major problem under this sector is after investment, the refunding from the government to the MSME sector is taking a lot of time, which means there is a tardy approach, a delay in the execution, and this also leads to delay in the clearances at the ports. So which also means once there is investment of the money, when there is no tax rebate that is coming back from the government to the MSME sector, it means there is liquidity crunch within the market. So this is another major issue. Adding to this, there is structural as well as the cyclical slowdown which the government intends to change within the export sector. That is why the government has selected the export sector to revive the economy. So under this particular revision of the economy, the government has introduced a new scheme called as the remission of duties or taxes on export product to incentivize the exporters. So kindly remember, this particular scheme will be replacing the merchandise exports for India scheme, that is MEIS, and this will continue up till 31st of December 2019, and after this From Jan 2020, what we will see is the introduction of this remission of duties or taxes on export product that is coming into picture. So the previous MIS scheme will be subsumed under this particular new scheme. So going forward, all the incentives that are to be provided will be provided under the new scheme, and the old scheme will be subsumed as well. So what we got to understand is what are the other measures that the government has taken in order to revive the export sector. What are these steps? One is the establishment of the interministerial working group. So what is this interministerial working group? As we discussed initially, there are multiple ministries and departments which have lack of coordination, and there is absence of data and coherence. In order to address this, what we have is the interministerial working group. It is this interministerial working group which will set up to monitor all the schemes that have been implemented with respect to the export sector. This group will monitor strict implementation of the announcements in a time bound manner, bring about coordination and coherence, and also collect data for the key monitoring and implementation. This is followed by the fully electronic refund module. As we discussed in one of the key challenges, the MSME sector has input tax credit, but they are not able to get this tax rebate on a timely basis. In order to address this particular concern, as we have discussed, what the government aims to do is it wants to free up the working capital of all those exporters. How? By introducing this fully electronic refund module for the quick and automated refund of the input tax credits. So earlier we had a lot of delay when it comes to the input tax credits, but with the establishment and digitization of this particular tool, the government intends to ensure that there is less delay and tardy approach by the government officials. So as the government works on the input tax credit, it also wants to work on the liquidity crunch, which is currently prevalent in the market, especially when it comes to the export sector. That is why it has also initiated key move of priority lending, which means the Reserve Bank of India will release additional funds of rupees 36,000, which will add up to rupees 68,000 crore as export credit under the priority sector for the same. So what we have is the liquidity crunch being addressed by the fully electronic refund module, where they'll have the tax rebate and with the priority lending as well. Followed by this is addressing of key issues when it comes to the logistics sector. Apart from providing credit as well as incentives to the exporters, the reforms package will also want to make this sector more efficient as well as globally competitive. What it means is currently when you have to export a particular commodity or a particular product, there are a lot of clearances that you may have to endure through. The custom clearances in the airport as well as the shipment, so on and so forth. This is taking a lot of time. This is taking undue delay. So what we require is export clearances on a faster mode. So for this, what we have is digitization. And when there is digitization, this will cut down the time, and there will be a prescribed standards that will put up on the customs as well as the export sector. So reducing the time to export and the turnaround time, which is meeting the international standards with respect to the logistics sector, is another key area which the government is planning to introduce with. Other decisions which are initiated by the government, which is aimed at making exports more competitive, includes working with those exporters to help them exploit the free trade agreement, which means that India has signed free trade agreements with multiple countries. So increasing the testing as well as certificate infrastructure, meeting the time bound module, and also meeting the standards as prescribed by the other country is the need of the hour. So what the government will do is it will provide the relevant infrastructure, it will provide a time bound module, it will also provide a standard that the other country is expecting, and it will give the same information to these exporters. So the minute they are able to meet these standards, the government would be able to exploit the free trade agreements with respect to the exporters as well. Among the most interesting announcement was the annual mega shopping festival that was announced by Nirmala Sitharamanji. So what happens in this particular case is, as we have seen in multiple other countries, let's take for example the United Arab Emirates, which currently has something called as the Dubai Shopping Festival. So likewise, they have multiple other shopping festivals in Japan, United States of America. So what they basically do is they organize fairs, they organize shopping festivals. Why? In order to attract the tourists tourists who are visiting their country as well as businesses and its people. This would promote the homegrown culture, the unique textiles, and a means of employment generation and value addition into the economy. So what it basically captures through this annual mega shopping festival is the tourists as well as the business people would be attracted towards this festival so that they would be able to showcase the inherent culture in that particular country. The same would now be practiced in India through this mega shopping festival by bringing in all the weavers from across India, household manufacturers, toy makers, so on and so forth, so that we from India would be able to uplift their livelihood and showcase their talents throughout the world. So what this festival will do is it will bring a focus on the gem sector, jewelry sector, and other textile sector that is prevalent in the market. Further, to increase the bank credit to the exporters, the Export Credit Guarantee Corporation will also expand the scope of its export credit insurance scheme that will provide a higher insurance cover to all those banks that are lending working capital for the exports. This is with respect to the export sector. Now let's focus on the housing sector. There are a large number of apartments and houses which are being constructed, but due to lack of funds, due to crunch in the liquidity, these projects are not completed. So the major objective under the housing sector is to focus on the construction of the unfinished units, for which the government has come up with what is called as the special fund to provide last mile funding for the unfinished housing units. Also remember, this is applicable only to those that are not categorized as non-performing assets and for all those that are not undergoing national company law tribunal proceedings and affordable and middle income projects. These are some of the exceptions. So the government will provide about 10,000 crore and other investors like the LIC will also put in roughly the same amount. Further, for the housing sector, Sitharaman also announced that external commercial borrowing guidelines will be relaxed to facilitate financing for the home buyers who are eligible under the Pradhana Mantri Awas Yojana. Interest on the house building advances will also be lowered so that this housing sector will also ignite when it comes to the economy, is what this article all about. So on a conclusion bit, the Congress has called this as a cosmetic measure. Why? With all these changes that are introduced, the government may see that the growth may reach up to 6% or 6.5%, but we need the economy growing at 8 to 8.5% to meet the target that have been set by the government of about 5 trillion economy. Unemployment is also at the 45-year high, which also means we need lot of structural reforms that needs to be initiated by the government. Currently, the world is run by gig economics as well as technological upgradation. When you say gig economy, it also means there is temporary employment. One such example is the Ola, the Uber, the Zomato, the Swiggy, so on and so forth. There is temporary employment. In order to make the demographic dividend an asset and not a liability, what we need is a structural reforms in the form of long-term employment and not in terms of gig economy. And an upgradation with respect to technology is what is happening in the current scenario, which also means the government will have to invest a lot of money on human resource, increasing their skill set, which the government has already done, but going forward it has to introduce many other steps, is what this article all about. Another important factor is countries like Vietnam, Cambodia and Bangladesh have capitalized on the trade war between United States of America as well as China. How? They have ensured that there is increase in the textile sector. So India should be able to learn from these type of countries and also introduce changes when it comes to its textile sector, is what this article all about. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about Hindi Divas. What is this Hindi Divas? Article 343 of the Indian Constitution speaks about the official language of the Union. It says the official language of the Union shall be Hindi in the Devanagari script. Further, it is the same article which further says the form of numerals that will be used in these official purposes will be in the form of international numbers. So it will not be Hindi numbers, but it will be the international numerological numbers. So this is article 343 of the Indian Constitution. So what is this Hindi Divas? It is on this day of September 14 that the Constituent Assembly adopted Hindi as the official language of India. That is why we have been celebrating Hindi Divas ever since 1953 to celebrate the inclusion of Hindi as the official language by the Constituent Assembly. But kindly remember, as per the Official Languages Act of 1963, Hindi and English are the languages to be used in correspondence between ministry as well as the state government. Now question is, why is that the central government always believes in promotion of Hindi while there are 22 other scheduled languages in the 8th schedule? The primary reason is because of one of the articles that is present in the constitution, and that is 351. And this article 351 basically says it is the directive for the development of the Hindi language that is given to the Union of India. So what this article clearly explains is that it shall be the duty of the union, that is the central government, to spread the language of Hindi, which means that this particular language Hindi will be connecting the entire India from north to south, east to west. To take up this particular initiative into picture, the central government will bring about all the steps to promote Hindi as the language for the entire composite culture of India by enriching and assimilating without actually interfering with multiple other languages that have been existing in India. On one side, you have Article 343, which speaks about the official language of the Union. On the other side, Article 351 of the Indian Constitution leads to development of Hindi as a language, as a composite culture for the entire India. It is with this that the government of India has always promoted. The present government as well as the previous governments in the past have promoted Hindi as one language which will connect the entire India. Why are we discussing this? That is because Home Minister Amit Shah has said the country should come together to promote Hindi as the language for the entire country. Now the question is, should Hindi be promoted? Let us look at arguments which says yes, Hindi should be promoted. In India, there are different languages. There are different languages and it has its own cultural ethos as well. But it is very important for a country like India, which has multiple languages, as many as 1500 and its dialects, to have one single language which will act as an identity globally. And one such language which can be utilized is Hindi here. Why? Because Hindi is the mother tongue of nearly 43.6% of the Indian population, which also means nearly 53 crore of Indians actually speak this language according to the 2011 census. So because there are as many number of people speaking this language, selecting this to represent us globally is one such initiative. Many languages in India also follow Devanagari script, and it also means native language have many words which are common with respect to Hindi as well. So they have a similar structure, they have a similar rules, and they also bear similarities. So when there are native languages, some like the South Indian languages and multiple other languages across India have similarities with respect to Hindi and Sanskrit, why not utilize this language as a promotion bit for the entire India? So this can act as a representation globally. When you look at United States of America, you have English. When you look at England, you have English. So why not have Hindi as one of those languages where India can be represented globally, are one set of arguments when it comes to why promotion of Hindi is required. Now let's also look at arguments which says that promotion of Hindi should not be happening. Why? Because the Constitution of India respects all languages. It believes in diversity. It believes in pluralism, and that is why it has recognized 22 languages spoken by a large number of people in the 8th schedule, which means you cannot just enforce one single languages while the constitution has already recognized 22 languages in its 8th schedule. It also dismisses the very idea of federal structure and diversity when you are imposing Hindi on a particular region, which means the need of the hour is to respect, protect, nurture diversity of our nation so that unity is ensured. Why? Let's take for example West Bengal, where Bengali is spoken. Let's take the South Indian states, Karnataka, Kannada. Telugu in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, and Tamil in Tamil Nadu, Malayalam in Kerala, and Marathi in Maharashtra. When you're trying to promote Hindi, impose Hindi, it means you are not respecting the local culture as well as its ethos. So what this article currently says is that it dismisses the clear idea of federal structure and the diversity. Shashi Tharoor in the parliamentary debate asks a question. What if hypothetically one day some of the southern Indian languages becomes a majority speaking languages? In this particular condition, are we going to promote that language in place of Hindi is one of the questions that was posed by Shashi Tharoor when it comes to this discussion of Hindi promotion. There are international examples as well. Let's take the example of Pakistan. Pakistan, when it was initially formed after the independence movement, you had the East Pakistan as well as the West Pakistan. The West Pakistan was dominated by Urdu speaking Punjabis. The East Pakistan was dominated by Bengali speaking Bengalis. So at one point of time, they wanted to bring about unity in terms of culture. So the cultural diversity was to be replaced by homogeneity, which means the Urdu speaking people tried to enforce their language onto the Bengali culture. That is when there was rupture, unrest in Bengal. So what we have is an example that the cultural diversity has to be respected, and when there is enforcement of an alien language to their cultural ethos, there will be rebellion as well as unrest, which can also lead to breakage of a country. Now, when you look at the internal sector, there has always been a compromise between the union wanting to impose Hindi and the South Indian states which do not want to accept Hindi as the imposition bit. There have been examples in the past where few people from the state of Tamil Nadu have lit themselves under the kerosene just because they were not able to take Hindi as their language, because this is not just a language but it is an emotion. So any imposition is not going to be good, as we have seen from the examples in the past with respect to Pakistan and also examples internally as well. So on a conclusion bit, we can cherish the words of C. Rajagopalachari, who once wrote in Swarajya that Hindi is undoubtedly a beautiful language. It is the language of vast majority, but he strongly protests against the imposition of this Hindi language. Why? Because in case people want to learn, they would learn it on their own. Any imposition will have a rebellion effect, was what once told by C. Rajagopalachari. So there is no point in making learning compulsory. It would be better to leave it to the matter as it stands today instead of kindling a simmering fire, is what C. Rajagopalachari had once said. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about police reforms initiated by the Odisha government. In order to understand what this article, we will have to know a bit of background. When it comes to the police, they are governed by the rule of law. They are working in challenging times. They have been working day in and day out to ensure that there is law and order, and so that we can sleep in peace. This also means that policing is generally used to serve the public good. There are also issues as well. There is rising population. There is pressure in the urban sector. There is labor disputes. There is agrarian distress. And then we also have celebrations in the form of festivals every now and then. In order to protect us, in order to ensure there is peace and tranquility in the society, there have been large number of sacrifices that these police officers are making. They do not have a time, they do not have a weekend, they do not have family and friends, just because they have to ensure that we live in peace and tranquility. Well, this is on one side. There is also another side as well. There is another side which says that there is negative tinge that is attached to the police. There is deterioration of standards as well as lawlessness when it comes to the police implementation as well as its execution. So on one side, we adore them. We acknowledge the fact that they have sacrifices that they have made just for the general public. But there is also another side of general public which has a serious disaffection towards them. Why? Because general public also feel they are the principal violators. Let's take some of the examples. They collect the free food, they collect the vegetables and groceries without even paying them. They are the perpetrators of crime. They get away without punishment. They get in close nexus with the criminals. So all this are making the general public see them as criminals in uniform because of their outdated police system. So on one side, you adore them, fair and fine. but they are also the ones who are principal violators when it comes to corruption. In line with this, they also have a close nexus with the antisocial elements. They have rude behavior, abusive language, and they are corrupted over a period of time. On the basis of the economic status, they adopt differential attitudes, violating the fundamental rights of Article 14 as well as human dignity that is mentioned under Article 21, which also means they segregate people on the basis of their economic status. The rich and the poor, there's segregation that is happening. They are also ignorant about the human rights. There are encounters which they are not giving accountability to. There is third degree treatment that they always employ. They are insensitive towards the victims because they have a close nexus with the political parties. And what we have also seen is the Kathua rape case that we see in Uttar Pradesh is one such example where there is close nexus between the political party as well as the police officer, and they have insensitivity towards the minorities as well, as we have seen in the Jharkhand lynching case. So all this has put police under the negative limelight, and they are also called as caged parrot by the Supreme Court when it comes to the Central Bureau of Investigation as well. So they are nothing but the coercive apparatus of the government, and they are not an independent agency but a hand of the political party as well as the political masters. When you look at commissions that have been appointed in the past, Srivastava Commission of Inquiry in the year 1961 with respect to the riots in the Jabalpur said there was laxity in investigation, there was inefficiency, and there was a close cooperation with the accused as well. And then the sixth report on the National Police Commission also said that there was bias towards a particular community while dealing with criminal as well as communal situations. So there have been a close nexus with the accused as pointed out by the Srivastava Commission, and there have been a National Commission report which says that they are in line with the fundamentalists rather than giving importance to justice, constitution, law, and enforcement. So all that these commissions have confirmed is that there requires a police reform when it comes to policing. And at the same time, the courts have also realized that policing in India is not working according to the contours of the constitution. In the state versus the Rampal Saroj, Session Court held that in order to help the accused persons, the police had given certain wrong facts to the court as well. So in order to support all those accused people, certain facts, certain evidences were fabricated by the police, and this was also being given to the court, is what the court said in the state versus Rampal Saroj case. So what this means is reports of commissions from the past, court rulings, court findings have all been taken and has been treated as a waste paper and have been chucked into the dustbin. Judges previously who have given their meticulous finding to all these police commissions have not been taken seriously and have not been implemented. So what this means is things from the past have not taken police reforms very seriously. However, in the present scenario, the Odisha government under Mo Sarkar, my government, has rolled out a key police reform. So what this reform basically does is the police officers will have to identify and give respect to all those people who are coming up to the police stations. There are complainants who would be coming up to the police station, and these police officers will have to treat them professionally, ethically, and in a human manner. So what happens under this Mo Sarkar is that these complainants will head to the police station. They'll launch a complaint, and how well they were treated will be investigated. Every complainant's phone number would be taken, his feedback would be sought, and in case the feedback of the complainant is good, then that police officer and that police station will be appraised and appreciated. In case the complainant gives a negative feedback, it also means a strict action will be initiated against that police officer. So this is one of the key reforms that have been initiated by the Odisha government. So apart from these reforms, what are the other reforms that can be initiated? This will require a multi-stakeholder approach, which will require the police, the government, and the people all coming up together, which means the police will have to take certain initiatives where training from the muzzle power to main power as well as service will have to be initiated. Human rights module, which is currently not there when it comes to their training, should be included so that human rights is expected. The readdressal of different complaints should be taken in a sensitive manner, understanding what the victim is currently undergoing. They'll have to sympathize with their cause instead of being rude as well as abusive. On the government front, the government will have to stop using them as the caged parrots, and they should less interfere or minimally interfere with the functioning of the police authorities. And when it comes to the people, it has to be the media which has to showcase what's happening in the society, and the people will also have to have cordial relationship with the police so that there is community policing going forward. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here says climate change can reduce banana yield in India, says one of the study. According to a study that was conducted by the Nature Climate Change Finds, it says that during the initial period of the climate change, due to the anthropological or the human forces, what we see is an increase in the banana production, which means the climate change has been introduced by the effects of the human inducement, and what we see is increase in the production of the banana. This was during the initial phases. However, going forward, whatever advantages that these countries had when it comes to increase in the production of banana, will also see a decline in the production of banana when it comes to the effects of climate change. So initially we saw an increase, but now what we will see is decline in the production, all due to the effects of climate change. Now let us also focus on some of the key facts with respect to banana. Banana had its origin in the tropical region of Southeast Asia, and when it comes to its health importance, it has a vitamin called as B6 which will help in fighting infection. The bananas are also rich in potassium and are also a great source of fiber as well. When it comes to the productivity, according to the Food and Agricultural Organization, with 29 million tons produced per year between 2010 and 2017, India is the world's #1 producer of banana. So kindly remember, this could be a key fact for your preliminary examination. So over 29% of the world's banana production is in India. The average yield of banana in India is around 60 tons per hectare. During the same period between 2010 and 17, China, which is the second largest producer globally, produced about 1/3 of India, 11 million tons per year. So what we have is India is the first producer and also consumer, and this is also followed by China. When it comes to banana production in India, the highest or what leads the chart is Tamil Nadu in India, and this is followed by Gujarat, and then it is followed by Maharashtra. So kindly remember these key facts because this can be a prospective question in your preliminary examination. Now let's look at some of the preliminary practice question. BG Care and Gobind Bala Pant Committee dealt with the official language. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements about polluter pays principle. It was first introduced in 1972 by the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. It is mentioned under the Rio Declaration. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is both the statements are correct. Kindly remember, a polluter pays principle basically means that in case I am the one who have polluted the environment, I will have to compensate for this damage that I have committed, and I will have to return the environment into its original state. In case I've committed a blunder which has caused grave pollution, I'll have to invest money personally. The government will not be picturing in, but I will have to invest my own personal money to restore this environment into the original state. And when we look at DC Mehta versus Kamalnath case in the year 1997, the court also held in case there is a person who's polluting the environment, this is a civil wrong and a tort has been committed by this person. So any person guilty of causing the pollution has to pay for the damages, and it is not the role of the government to meet the cost. Why? Because in case the government is meeting the cost, it also means financial burden will be pressed on the taxpayer, which has to be avoided, is what was told in the DC Mehta versus Kamalnath and others in the year 1997. Why have we picked this article? That is because this article also mentions about the polluter pays principle. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to Lok Adalats, it is one of the alternative dispute readdressal mechanisms. Lok Adalats have been given statutory status under the Legal Services Authorities Act of 1987. If the parties are not satisfied with the award of the Lok Adalat, though there is no provision for an appeal against such an award, but they are free to initiate litigation. Which of the above statements are incorrect? So the answer for this is none of them. Why? Because all the three statements are right. Why have we picked this up? Because there is an article with respect to Lok Adalat. That is why this becomes very important. Now let's look into the map based question. The Wakhan corridor is a region connecting the narrow strip in the northeastern Afghanistan. Why have we picked this up? That is because there is a mention with respect to Afghanistan. So kindly remember, this is a narrow strip on the northeastern part of Afghanistan. Now let's look into the previous year question. The mind of the makers of the Constitution of India is reflected in which of the following? The answer to this is the preamble. Now let's look into the mains practice question. What is the difference between cyclical and structural slowdown? Are the steps taken by the government enough? What else should the government do to reduce the slowdown hampering the Indian economy? Next question. The growing distance between the general public and police can be minimized by coming together of police, government and public. Suggest measures to address the challenging issue. So please write all your answers on the comment section so that you guys can have a peer review and also come up with constructive criticism in case of any. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.